Thinking about some of the things that Trudeau did and then thinking about our current strike, I wonder if they'll freeze the bank accounts.
Watching these guys trying to compare the current strikes to the occupation in Ottawa and like blaming it on Trudeau, like they froze the bank accounts because they tried to overthrow the government, right? Like they wrote it down. Did you guys do like basic research, or are you just talking out of your ass like the douchebag podcasters that you are, right? That's way to go, right? Anyway, I mean, the occupiers in Ottawa tortures its citizens for 3 weeks, day in, day out. And the strikers are just fighting for better wages and they go home at night, right? You really don't see the difference? Way to go. I bet you these guys wax fucking Elon's balls too, eh? Way to go, douche bros.
Daddy, chill.
Fellow douche bro here. Yes, it's your boy Josh. We are here for it. Yes, loved your video. Also loved all the comments on the video. This was a time that I realized it was a time of education for your boy. She taught me some things, which personally, as a person who didn't do any research and doesn't know what he's talking about, was really helpful for me. Went through the comments on your video, saw the comments on my video, and there's some things that really touched at home. So a couple things. Was the messaging during the convoy really hit home with a lot of people. I think it was very effective. We understood what the convoy was all about. As you said, they were occupiers. They were trying to overthrow the government. It was an American-sponsored coup, and they were all racist. Spot on. I 100% could not agree with any of that. What I've understood is a lot of things you've mentioned, and what I've been seeing as a consistent theme in a lot of the comments on this this video, is the fact that the term occupation was pushed a lot by those like Jagmeet Singh, Justin Trudeau, and the media, when it was, I guess, an occupation, but it wasn't much different than other protests that have happened in this country over the years. The difference with this one, it was inconvenient to the government at the time. Secondly, overthrow of the government. That was one of the big themes that kept coming up in these comments, which I thought was really, really interesting. People have been kind of, again, that was pushed in the media a lot. This group wants to overthrow the government because they wrote it down. You said it yourself. It was printed. And really, there was no such thing as a statement of wanting to overthrow the government, because we don't have an impeachment process in this country. But they were asking the Governor General of the country to see if he would be willing to dismiss Justin Trudeau from his position. That's what they were asking for. That's not an overthrow of the government by any stretch of imagination. That is just not being happy with your leader and what he's doing to the country. And because of just even your response to me, it really showed a lot. It showed that you were very dismissive of what we had to say. Obviously, we were making jokes, so I can see how you come across that way. You were, made disparaging remarks about us. And that's exactly how this all works. That's exactly what the government wants. Divide and conquer. And that's what happened. The messaging that was put out wasn't things that were necessarily true, but they made you think it was true and thus vilified those who were protesting at the time. And yes, the strikers and the people who protested the convoy are two in the same. They both are unhappy with their situation and they're protesting the government to have something change. Nothing different there. Strikers, though, they did hold up ports. They did take over bridges. They halted traffic. Tell me what's different than what the convoy protest did. I'd be curious. Hit me up. And Philip, hit my music.
Innovation is in our veins. Soon the whole world will know our names. Sharing our knowledge and freedom reign. We here for the people, you know it's our way. Setting foundations is part of the dream. It doesn't matter if you're new to the game. Listen up now, cause we all gon' say, elevate, 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 higher, elevate, 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 higher. We gon' rise up, we all gon' shine. Work through adversity, stay on the grind. Elevate, elevate, this is our time. Elevate, elevate.
Welcome to the Elevate Podcast, everyone. It's so great to have you all on one more time. It's your boy Josh
Dalton.
And we're grateful to be back on with you. He broke in again. He broke into the house. He came back into the studio. Why are you back here, man? Holy smokes, we're happy to have you.
Can't get enough of me.
Can't get enough of you. No, it's really interesting. Reg is still in town, obviously, and he's like, I'm gonna keep occupying your house.
occupying your podcast.
Oh, it ain't no protest here. Apparently, we're occupying stuff. No, we're happy to have Reg back on, just to kind of keep the chats alive, keep things lively around here, and excited to have you with us, man. A couple of things we're hitting today. We're talking about policing here in the city of Halifax, and also policing as a whole. Very interesting. And as well as we're going to do some updates on sustainable marine and what happened there, and we're finding out. Yep, classic government red tape as per usual. Here we are. We're excited to get right into it. But first off, thank you for joining us. Keep liking, keep subscribing to what we got going on here. Don't forget that we do have a Thursday episode for our members only. If you're interested in listening to that, we'll be touching on the First Republic collapse of the bank, second largest banking collapse in American history. Happened last week. We'll be getting into all of that and how that could affect us here at home. So, first off, I know Reg was a little passionate. He's feeling good. Feeling Gucci over here. As a fellow douche bro, what do you want to share with us today?
Oh, I mean, like you said, thank you for all the love and all the likes. Thank you for the hate too. I mean, that's energy too. I mean, when you think about it, like people who are indifferent, they're not commenting, they're not stitching videos, they're not entering the conversation. So bring on the hate too. We like to see it.
Nice.
But I had a really awesome conversation yesterday that was like kind of changed my viewpoint a little bit. I'm not gonna lie. I was kind of one of those people who were like, abolish the police. Like,
you were an ACAB.
Yeah, I was like, yep,
okay,
down with it. I was like, those people, they're just a scourge on society. Also, I don't like parking tickets or speeding tickets. Or I have many speeding tickets to my name, so that might also have something to do with it. I went to Germany, was on the Autobahn, and it was great. I loved
drive
it.
like me. You're like a rager. That's crazy.
Dalton's amazing.
I thought you drive like quite slowly though. I thought that was the thing.
No, he does not. He drives like he's from Toronto. He drove in New York City and he was in love.
Oh no! When I was in Germany and drove on the Autobahn, I made one really big mistake. So when I was at the rental place, they're like, "We have this Ford Fiesta." And I was like, "Sounds good." Got on the Autobahn. I was like, I should have got a nicer car. Oh. That Ford Fiesta went to 203 kilometers an hour, though.
That's it? Wow, you actually pushed it.
That's pretty good.
That was as far as it could go. 2, 3. I was like, Jen, take a picture of me. Take a picture of me. I was like, get the speed.
It only holds for 2 seconds. Gee.
But I had this really awesome conversation with a police officer yesterday.
That's awesome. Before we get into that, though, you had something to say about Tim Houston, though.
Yeah. Man, I saw Tim's video come out where he was kind of talking about the doctors, and it was one of those videos, that you kind of, it's an obligatory thing where you have a day of recognition for whatever industry, and you get up there and speak on it. And he came out and he was like really vulnerable about the fact that his father had passed away on the weekend, and it was the healthcare staff that like kind of guided them through the process and really was there for them. And it was really genuine. I was like, damn, this is the kind of thing we need out of more leaders. Like I was like, hats off to you, Tim. Like that was really good. It was really moving. And I was just like, I felt something. I was like, oh.
Dude, a politician made you feel something that wasn't anger.
No, I was like, it was pride. I was like, I'm proud to be a Nova Scotian. I'm proud that I voted for you. I was just like, good for you. I was like, we need more of you. So, people can hate on him for whatever reason and under the sun, but I was just like, you know what? You're a real person, and I really respect that. So it was kind of nice.
Dude,
absolutely. Oh, no, I'm just agreeing, yeah.
Totally. There's a big opportunity right now for politicians right now, and that is if you actually do what you say you're going to do, and that's protect the interests of your constituents. It's amazing how easy that job, like it is easy for people to fall in love with you if you do that. But many politicians don't do that. And so thus they are very hated. And we could go back to it all the time. That's what happened with Elizabeth Smith McCrossin, where she just stood up for her constituents and like they all fell in love with her and she won in a landslide the election as an independent.
Yeah.
People are starving for that.
Yeah, definitely. And it was funny because we were even talking about that last night too. Just the fact that like people talking about like, well, the healthcare system is in shambles. It's like, yeah, but this has been like many years, like decades in the making for this kind of a breakdown. And it's like, I'm sorry that you got stuck with it for today, but like you look at the guy and he's like, we've opened up a healthcare training facility in Cape Breton. I think it might be a full-fledged med school.
It's a med school, yeah.
It is a med school, yeah. So in Cape Breton, and we're like trying to do all these different things. We're throwing money like left, right, and center at like healthcare. It's like he's kind of like looking like I'm doing all I can do.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you really are. And I kind of feel for him in that way, especially having been a healthcare worker myself. Like there's things that are broken there that need time to fix. And it's, you know, it's not going to be something quick, but you know, when you're, you know, Joe Public in the emergency room waiting 2 hours to be triaged, like it's really easy to be like, what is that stupid guy doing? but like seeing that video was kind of like a really good reminder, like, man, this guy's human and he's going through it just the same way as we are. So it was really good. It's like, shout out to you, Tim. Good job.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, like, because you have it, like, people get really frustrated about this in the States, right? Where your political leaders aren't using the same systems that you use.
Mm-hmm.
Thus, it feels a huge detachment from whatever they're talking about. This is a scenario with Tim Houston, especially, and with any leader in Canada. Like, they're using the same system we are for the most part, and they feel the same pains we do for the most part. If you're in the East Coast of Canada, you're not really going to get in Ontario. You can get private healthcare all you want.
So almost like a win for public healthcare, Josh. Is that what you're saying?
No. I mean, I'd be doing the same thing if I was them. I can tell y'all screw off.
Okay, I'm just wondering. So you're saying that by having our political leaders use our public healthcare system, it keeps them more in touch with the everyday person.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, we're good.
If you're going to make us
I don't want to be the everyday person. I want healthcare now.
Well, that's like, yeah, that's my point was if we're going to be, if you're going to force us to use a system, then you should have to use it too. But if everyone's got options, then I'm okay. Those are the options you decided. Fair play.
You said something about private healthcare in Ontario. Is that true?
Yep.
Oh, really? For like emergency services or just like your general?
More so general,
or?
but like, yeah, like for example, I had friends of ours who use the service in Toronto, and their son broke his arm.
Right.
They got him in, got an x-ray, put a cast on him, all set, ready to go within an hour.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I've noticed now there are, like, I think we talked about it a couple months ago that it's run by nurse practitioners and you pay the monthly. It's like Maple in person.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, the Guardian by Me is offering a primary care clinic.
Yeah, that was something else the government brought in.
Yeah.
Was actually like turning pharmacies into primary care centers.
Oh,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all the Guardians that are owned by, I think it's called IMP pharmacies, they own Guardians from like here to like, I think Enfield or something like that, maybe. There's nurse practitioners that work like 3 days a week that can prescribe and diagnose to an extent.
that's awesome.
Yeah. It costs money. Your first 3 are free though by MSI.
Oh,
Yeah.
See, I honestly think that's kind of the model going forward. Is like, I keep alluding back to this like 2 hours in the waiting room because like that drove me nuts. I was like,
And that's just a triage.
to be triaged.
That's
like,
just to be told how long you have to wait again.
Yeah. I was like, I'm literally bleeding out right now. And they were like, oh, well, you need to be seen. I was like, really? I was like, I'm woozy. I've lost enough blood. And they were like, oh my God, like, we need to get you seen. And I was like, yeah. And so then they like move my thing to the top of the pile. But I'm like, that's triaging. Like, just do that.
Triage of the QE2 is the guy behind the screen writes your name and takes your code info and slaps a paper down in.
I know. And so I was
Where's the computers?
but I was like, there's no reason you need a registered nurse to do that. Like,
Hannah and I were saying that when we were there. I was like, that's a valuable nurse.
like exactly. It's credentialism is what I call it. It's like where you're making something that shouldn't need all this credentials. You're raising the standard to get into that position. Like
Yes.
40 years ago, you could walk out of high school, be trained on the job after 8 months, do that job and do it competently. There's no reason why you couldn't be able to do that. When I worked in the labs at the QE2, basically we had senior staff there that had worked there their entire lives. They've worked there their entire career. And that's what they said. They said, we walked out of high school, walked into the place. They gave us training on the job. We were paid while we were trained and we shadowed and we learned on the job. And now we've worked it for 40 years. And the other thing that they got like meal vouchers. They got bonuses at Christmas time. They were given a turkey dinner and they're like, why does nobody want to work in healthcare? And it's like, where is all this gone? Like we just
Right.
spent how many years in university, how many thousands of dollars on an education, and then to come in and make lower wages than what they did, X number of years ago with less benefits and less respect. It's like,
Who would do that?
nobody wants to do that. And so going back to my point, it's credentialism. Like, you could totally have somebody come in there, be trained on the job, do that job, and have that triaging unit like run very quickly, very smoothly. And if there was a case where that person was like unsure of how severe a case was, they could call on the nurse practitioner that's there watching 4 or 5 people. Like, and then you free up all the other nurses to then go be assisting and doing more procedures with the doctors. And those doctors are now freed up to do more specialized things. So just bring more bodies in and stop, holding up the process. So this is why I was like really excited with all these pharmacies actually starting to do like primary care, because it's like, I don't need to go see a doctor to get a wart burnt off your foot or like new amoxicillin because you've got a sinus cold. Like,
You just do it yourself.
but you know what I mean? Like that's stuff that could all be done at a pharmacy and very easily.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
Yeah, we were giving away shots throughout the pandemic in these pharmacies. Let's get her going.
Yeah, man.
Let's expand that.
For the first time also, I got a letter from, you talked about the last time you were here, a letter from MSI verifying the services my family doctor actually gave me.
right.
And it was for a tetanus shot. And I was like, yes, she did give me the tetanus shot. And the question asked, did they charge you and also bill to MSI? If so, how much did you pay? And I was like, no, I didn't. So obviously there are some doctors who are billing the patient and billing MSI.
Gee.
I was like, no, I didn't. That was not charged, but I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
I finally got one.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Well, for any further delay, we'll actually jump into the show here. But update on sustainable marine. We got an article here that actually came about from Elisa Oberman, who is the executive director at Marine Renewables Canada, who is like has a heavy footprint in the space of tidal energy, tidal work, marine stuff, all that type of stuff. So she reposted Tim Houston's, call on the federal government of what they've been doing, what's been happening, bringing attention to the Scottish company leaving Nova Scotia who is working on tidal energy. And she says, today, Canada's most advanced tidal energy project led by Sustainable Marine came to a close, not because of a technology failure or financial challenge. 5 years of insurmountable regulatory challenges under the Fisheries Act led to this. There are solutions to these challenges, and it starts with leadership. Great to see Premier Tim Houston's ongoing support for the marine renewables energy in Nova Scotia.
Now scroll down into the comments. There was one that was really good. Aaron Titus right there. I'm a fisherman and a lifelong resident of Briar Island, and Sustainable Marine is killing as much sea life with that platform as the ferry and the boat propellers that go through this harbor 100 times a day, which is none. I've watched this project from the water and my doorstep since it started. As a fisherman and a former whale watching boat captain, I find this a very sad day.
Straight up, Aaron.
Yeah. Just like,
I love that.
Me
He said,
too.
which is none.
but it's true. When you think about the Sustainable Marine Tidal Project, it is water going through propellers, like to turn a turbine to create energy. It's like, yeah, how much gets killed from the ferry that we have subsidized by stupid amounts of tax dollars? How much is getting killed by all the different fishing boats that are out there? Like, it's just very frustrating to be like, okay, the federal government is holding this up because of fish habitat. It's like, what?
Yeah.
Which fish?
Yeah.
Well, that comes back to kind of our point from last week, right? Where, if you really don't want to you want to make sure that the conservative brand doesn't get a win, then you'll use whatever you can in your power to make sure that doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. And it seems like it's more of an excuse than it is an actual issue to make sure that this doesn't go forward.
Yeah. And so that was kind of like my leading theory, honestly, in my head. And then the other part of me is like, is it that, or is it actually just like regulatory incompetence where it's just been sitting on somebody's desk and they're like, I don't care, it doesn't affect Ontario. It's just like not even making it through the process. Like, you know what I mean? But I do think that if we did have a Liberal government in Nova Scotia and we had the Liberal federals, it would probably get a lot more pressure to go through. So it may not be as malicious as we might think. It may actually just be like a little bit of incompetence, a little bit of like indifference. So that would be my probably where I lean to the most, I think, is that indifference rather than outright malicious, like, screw Nova Scotia. So
Yeah, that's definitely a Reg take, 100%. I agree. So
yeah.
I will always fall, at least with this government, to the malicious side of things, and because they've had a history of doing things like this. So I will not be giving them the benefit of the doubt on this one. I think they're trying to screw just people who are governments that have conservative governments. I think they're trying to screw over. Period. Because as I said, if they get a win on green energy,
It makes the narrative fall apart.
absolutely.
Yeah, it destroys everything they're saying.
Mm-hmm. So you can't have that happen, or else you're going to get screwed in the federal election if you're Trudeau. Like, oh, well, what can I go to then? Polyev bolstered the convoy back in 2022. That's what you got. Like, you want to be able to, make sure you have the boogeyman and make sure it's a bad guy who's like, these guys are going to keep throwing oil in the ocean. They only support big business, even though I've done it myself. And
The whole big business argument I find so interesting as well, because like you look during the pandemic, like 2020, there was a lot of big businesses that were allowed to be open.
oh, yeah.
It was like only big box stores. Like you could tramp around a Walmart all day long as long as you walk the arrows the right way. But you could not go to a local store or a farmer's market, or there's no way.
And people were so mad if you didn't follow the arrows.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, listen, I took part. I just like to listen. You're going the wrong way.
I might have like a little bit of a rebellious side because I was like, I'm walking the other way in this aisle and I don't even care. Well, I think it's BS.
Well, we're in a building that has air recyclers on the roof. What are we doing?
Yeah. And like the worst part too is like I said, being an ex-healthcare worker, like all of my healthcare worker friends were all just like, this is stupid, this is garbage.
Dang.
And so being on the inside, working the microbiology lab with COVID testing, like, you know what I mean? Like arrows on the floor are not doing anything. It's theater. It's all theater. But yeah.
I mean, yeah, like whatever it does, whatever you can do as a government to make your people feel better makes your job easier, right?
Yeah.
And that's essentially what the goal is of a lot of what happened during the pandemic was there was a lot of theater because of it. Even when it came to like us putting border patrol on the Nova Scotian border.
I remember when I had to apply for a license to go into PEI. Like,
Yeah.
And then remember the big PEI like encampment when the huge festival tents that you like drive through to talk to 3 different agents, and I was like, I'm a Canadian, and not to play like the I'm a Canadian card, but what is going on?
Yeah,
I'm not crossing a border.
Yeah,
it's between provinces.
But it was funny though, for a while there, like everybody was just like, blow up the marshes in between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia. They're like, dig them out. Get that seawater flowing. We don't want anybody coming in.
I know.
And so,
well, it was right when you were allowed to like start traveling again. My folks were planning a trip to PEI, and people were vandalizing vehicles that had Nova Scotia plates.
oh yeah. There was a story that came out of Bridgewater, about an hour outside of Halifax, and there was a couple that they had rented a car because their car broke down. The car rental company had Ontario plates on it.
Oh.
And they left the car in one of the big box store parking lots, and somebody had knifed the tires and wrote, "Go home." It was like, well, one, they were Nova Scotians. 2, how are they supposed to go home if you knife their tires? Like, that kind of defeats the purpose. You've just stranded them there.
Gee, wow, that seems like a very familiar rhetoric from a 2016 election, but I'm not going to say nothing. I'm going to stay quiet on that one. Build the wall. Okay, so let's talk about some very spicy topics we want to kind of move into, though. Mm-hmm. You had some conversations. What am I seeing here? So Halifax Council had approved a $1.2 billion budget with 94.6 of it going towards policing, including a mandate to hire 628,000 more police.
No, $628,000 was slated just for new hires.
Oh,
police.
Just for new hires.
Yeah.
Shoot. I was about to say, I was like, that's like more than population of Nova Scotia.
What is going
the
on?
population of Halifax.
Wait.
Yeah. No. So it was really interesting actually looking at the Halifax budget on how much actually went towards policing. And then when you look at their increasing property taxes and people are like, I can barely afford food right now. It's so crazy and inflation is just wild. Why are we increasing property taxes to pay for more police? And so, like I kind of alluded to earlier, I was just like, get rid of the police, like no police. I'm totally good with it. And yeah, I'm curious where you both stood on that. So
I was always very pro police.
Yeah. I wouldn't say I was pro police, but I was like they're for me, like the government in some cases, they're a necessary evil.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I guess I don't love cops, but I would rather them be there than non-existent at all.
Yeah. So when I was looking at this, I was just like, because I come at it from a different approach. Like I read the Street Checks report, which like very shamefully showed how racist some of the practices have been over the years and still are in some ways. And then also just kind of like looking at everything that was coming out of the South about policing, and then kind of like looking at this message of like, you know what, like you've got people who are in desperate situations who act bad. And it's like, if you fixed the upstream effects, like they wouldn't need to be policed. Or when you looked at like the shooting that happened in northern New Brunswick, where there was an Indigenous lady who had a wellness check called, and because she was afraid that somebody was outside her home that was trying to get her. And so then you had police bust down her door, and she had a knife in her hand, and they filled her body with bullets. And it's like, how is that a wellness check? Like the lady's freaked out thinking there's somebody out there, like, you know, trying to get her. And so she's trying to protect herself, and then you come in and shoot her to death. So I had a very poor view of police. And so had a very interesting conversation then with an off-duty police officer last night watching the Toronto lose their hockey game. Yeah, they were just kind of talking about the fact that they are going to be moving from HRP, so Halifax Regional Police, to the RCMP. And one of the reasons they cited was they said that the lack of training, the lack of support for police officers, and then the lack of, I don't want to say retribution, but like, I'm not sure what word I'm looking for, but like when you have a police officer that acts poorly, they're protected by the police union. And what they had alluded to was the fact that there was a lot of police officers in the HRP that may not be acting 100% within the law that they're supposed to uphold, and take what you will from that. But and they said basically that it's really disheartening and it's really hard to work with those people, because it does give all police officers a bad name, and then the police union backs them up and keeps them in positions of power, and they don't get reprimanded for it. And so I was just like, that's really interesting. But then on the flip side, we were also talking about like legalization of drugs. And I said, you know, look at Portugal as an example of like where they legalized all the different drugs that are out there, and like what effect that they had. And I like pulled up some information like from some very credible sources about like the amount of drug related overdose deaths that went down, the amount of crime that went down, like all the different indicators that went down. And they were like, oh, no, I don't believe that could happen. And I was like, well, it did. Like you can see it right there. And like, no, I don't. Well, that's great for Portugal, but that can't happen here. So it was very interesting to kind of see, like, on one hand, a very intelligent, thoughtful view on policing of like the training isn't adequate. There's no reprimand for police officers who behave badly, because nobody's going to turn on one of their own, because then they're going to be made the pariah of the force, basically. And you're going to be ostracized, and your life is going to be made a living hell. So there's like nobody policing the police. And I already mentioned the training not being adequate. And yeah, but then on the other hand, also being like, here's like very viable solutions, and having that like ingrained, like drug users are bad, people who do drugs are bad, this is bad, they need to be stopped kind of thing. And then the last thing that they talked about was the fact that the justice system, when you do actually have a situation where you have a bad person who is actively harming the community, they spoke of like this one guy who actually was in getting young men in the African Nova Scotian community hooked on drugs at the age of like 10, 11, 12 years of age, just evil person like doing this so that he can get them selling, using, and basically become clientele. And so they're just kids at that point, right? And that this person was actually apprehended downtown with a loaded gun in their vehicle and a kilo of cocaine, and that they brought them in and the courts released them, you know, to be tried later on and couldn't keep that person in custody. And then the police officers who brought them in, this particular person was just like, we'd been working on that for so long to find a way to get that person out of the community because we couldn't prove that they were doing what they were doing, which we know what they were doing, which the community themselves said they are harming our children. We need to get this person out of here. And then they finally get the person, and the justice system is like, no, this is your first offense. Like, go home until your court date. And so I had a whole different mindset shift of like, oh my God. Like, even the people who are like, I'm doing this for the right reasons, even though there's like so many flaws, so many cracks in this, like, and they're like, I'm doing the right thing. They can't win, kind of thing. And so I definitely had like a little bit of an awakening where I was just like, oh, I need to be a little more unbiased in my view of this issue. And it was kind of, yeah, it was really, really interesting to hear. But like I said, definitely some points of contention where I was just like, man, you got to look at the research on some things. Like when you see like positive movements that seem counterintuitive, like legalization of drugs or legalization of sex work or legalization of these things that are considered like the big bads, but then actually lead to less people dying, less people being harmed. It was really interesting.
But you just create more black markets, or sorry, you create more opportunity and space for harmful activity by doing that, I find.
No, you actually kind of remove the black market, right? Because it becomes...
I'm not saying it's a black market.
No, but what I'm saying is like those things create black markets, which create the conditions for harm. So when you actually bring that to light, you remove all that secret harm that's being done that leads to death, that leads to more tragic outcomes. So you might see it because it's more visible, but it's still all happening, and it's actually happening less when it's visible.
So well, I'm gonna ask this question straight.
Yep.
So you're saying we do this, we then essentially have legal means to legally pimp women. That's a good thing?
You you say we legally have means to pimp women. So that's a very loaded comment in itself, because you're basically saying that we continue with the old system but make it legal.
That's essentially what you're proposing, though.
Not necessarily. I mean, right now you have women that are online in like OnlyFans and other means right now where they're still doing that kind of work. And as long as time continues, you're going to have people who want that service. And then if you don't regulate it, you're going to have people who get abused and who get injured or who get harmed or even killed through that. So it's not like the thing is going to go away if we police it harder. It's just not.
Exactly. Well, exactly. So, it's also not going to go away if you just let it go either.
No, but what the thing is, it's like, it's not an abstinence approach. It's a harm reduced approach to this kind of stuff.
So
which I know kind of goes against your thinking, but it's a harm reduced approach to this.
Well, I'm just thinking, so, if you leave people alone and you like leave Windmill Road as it is over here in Dartmouth.
Yeah.
And you're saying that like it's just all going to be good after that.
I'm not saying leave it alone. I'm saying regulate, create the proper conditions, create an industry so that there are like legal ramifications, so that if a sex worker is abused or beat up or something like that, they go to the doctor, they go to the court, or they go to the police and say, I'm a sex worker. I've been beaten by client X. And then not only is it now like a complaint against that person, but it's a legitimized complaint versus the whole like, well, you're a sex worker, so you were really asking for it kind of thing.
Or it's like you're incriminating yourself by coming forward type of thing.
Exactly.
Right.
Does that exist in Canada where, because I know in the States, if you call the police and say someone beat me while I was acting as a sex worker, you can get arrested for being a sex worker, even if you're hurt. Does that exist in Canada?
Yeah.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was asking about. Yeah.
But what's interesting in Canada about drugs, though, is that you can go to a doctor or a medical facility or whatever and say, I've used these drugs, and get help and not be charged.
Yes.
Which is something I didn't realize, because that was something that was clarified last night, which I thought was really cool, which I don't know if that's public knowledge. But you cannot sell. Obviously, you can't transport or have any kind of intention to distribute, and which I totally agree with.
But you could go to Emerge and say, I just took heroin and I'm feeling like
I
X
just had a
and
bunch of crystal meth.
right.
Yeah, and then actually be treated. But the problem is where it becomes problematic is that person who is then being treated, like if they're not followed up with, because we know that happens right now in our healthcare system. And if they're not given something to kind of replace that opioid or drug that they've been using, they're going to fall back into the same pattern, because it's a hook. It's an addiction, right? It's a health problem.
Yeah.
So it was just really interesting.
On that note, then, I'm really curious, now that you have this perspective, what are your thoughts on what they've been doing out in Vancouver, where they have legalized like hard drugs?
Yeah, I think it's a good move. I think it's something that definitely needs to be studied, because I know that they've already kind of like talked about the paramedics saying like we're seeing less overdose related deaths because of it, because people are actually able to go to these clinics, which are not like everywhere either. That's the other part, is like they're able to go to a clinic and actually receive dispensed drugs. So they're not laced with fentanyl. They're not laced with everything else under the sun. And then a lot of times that actually creates spaces for people to say, hey, I know that I'm getting this drug. I'm not well. What else is there out there for me? And so you create conditions for people to access services to get better, rather than it being somebody going to a back alleyway and meeting up with their dealer and doing something shady in the dark.
Interesting.
But
I'd be curious to, I want to do more look into this, of what, say, things were like even, I don't know, like we can go back even to the 40s. I'd be curious what like overdoses were looking like, what kind of that type of black market crime was looking like, and then comparing it to today. Are we seeing a drop? Are we seeing an increase? Or is it about the same? I'd be interested.
Oh, it's so interesting. If you read Johann Hari's book, Chasing the Scream, they kind of talk about that, how heroin in like the 30s, 40s, 50s was like just like normal. Like, oh, you had a headache? Just have some heroin. That was just like part of the American culture. Like,
Right.
like ads with like the housewife just having some heroin. Like that was just
Interesting.
Yeah, it was just like normal. And then when they came down hard on drugs, and then all of these people then who had been using now don't have access to their drugs, are just like, oh my God, what do we do? And so like the crisis that came out of that, and then there was like a whole lot of like racial things that happened where like a lot of this was like blamed on the African American community, and it was just it's really interesting book, really really well thought out, really well researched. So definitely recommend it. He's got another couple books that like I love everything he puts out. It's really good.
Good call.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So you've officially moved from an ACAB perspective to like, okay, there's a necessity
reformed policing, and because What are
your thoughts on community policing?
Community policing? I don't know.
It's almost like, there's like a danger almost to create a militia. So almost what it feels like.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So you mean like its own government within its city? Like,
not so much that.
like
It's
an
like
area.
You have like you have volunteers that essentially act as like community police officers that just like, keep an eye out for each other, this, that, the other. There's like the right community, I think it would work. But we all know that humans are definitely a little rough.
Right.
So things can go south pretty quickly.
Right. So you're saying
Yeah.
like there could be power dynamic issues.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden you get a lynch mob, and it's like they believe that somebody is one way, and then it's like, okay, take them out. Like,
Sorry, just reminded me of
Right.
a story Bobby Lee told. Pull it up, Bobby Lee, Japanese boiling water story. It's a short. It'll be 30 seconds long. Comical.
Bobby Orr.
I was maybe 8. He goes, do you know what Japanese used to do to us? I go, no. Because I'm a kid.
Yeah, and you're like 8,
I'm 8.
and you're like,
They
oh,
used to hang-
lollipop.
They used to hang Korean by the ankle with a rope. From a tree. And I go, oh. But below, they take a big pot of boiling water. Boiling water. I go, and I'm sleeping like this. Yeah? He goes, then they dunk. They dunk Korean in. And we come out. Ah! Right? They dunk us every time. Leia skin gone. Ah! Right? And he goes, good night.
Okay, that was way better when he told it.
Totally.
Good night.
Much better when he said it. But anyways, so I was just thinking of that where you talked about how like, you know, lynchings can happen in these communities where they're just kind of like left to their own devices to police their own. You know, people rise to the top and they like the power and things can go sideways real quickly.
Well, it was funny because I got asked the question. They're like, "Have you ever considered policing?" I was like, "Not in your life." Like, I've never ever been like, "Yes, I want to be a police officer." And they're like, "Really?" I was like, "No, I was in the military for 3 years. Like, that was enough. No thanks."
That's fair.
But
Yeah, I mean, there's an attractive argument for community policing if it's like if they have accountability. Because I think it is important to have people from your community who just like we're looking out for each other, and that's kind of the problem we're having with policing in general. Is we've become so detached from each other in our communities.
Yeah.
That like, you know, now police don't really know who you are, don't care who you are, and they'll rough you up if they have to.
yeah, well, that's kind of what's like, actually CBC brought up the article about the Finnish police officers and like the training they go through and how it's like there's so much respect between community for police and then vice versa, where they're like, okay, we spend so much time doing community work and actually being visible, not as a police officer, but first as a citizen. And like kind of this idea of like not being above the law, but being governed by the same laws. And so it was just kind of a really, really nice take on it.
What a novel concept.
I know, right? I was just like, this should be the bar that we trip
bar
over.
is so low. Yeah.
But yeah, it was really interesting, and like that was what came out of the police check report, or not police check. The mass casualty report that was just recently released about the mass shooting in Nova Scotia.
And they said we're gonna do nothing about it.
Yeah, well, they were like, oh no, we need to take, because they have all the RCMP are trained in one spot in Saskatchewan. I can't remember the place now, but they're like, this is actually really bad for creating groupthink. And the Saskatchewan government was like, absolutely not. We need this here. This is great for the economy.
Sure.
Like,
That's all we have.
yeah. And they're like, don't take this from us. I was like,
You can see from miles away.
but like, it was clear in the report. They're like, no, like this is actually not good. Like creating a bunch of groupthink robots. Like that's not what we want. We want people who are like contextually appropriate for the area, who understand the people, who understand the culture, who understand like the very makeup of that area. Like we don't want to just like,
It's funny
copy paste.
because RCMP has like a pretty blatant rule that they will not place you where you live. Like they,
Which is kind of like, I
The
understand.
reverse thinking, right?
Yeah, I understand why, because they're like, we don't want people to just like bend the rules for their friends.
yeah.
But it's like, but also at the same time, you need to be able to understand the community in order to actually police it, I think.
Totally.
So you need a middle ground.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, you get someone coming in from Toronto, you think they're going to care about you?
And do you think a Nova Scotian's going to respect a Torontonian cop?
No, exactly.
No. So
No chance.
So you mentioned that HRP is transitioning to RCMP. Is that what you said?
No, this particular person is leaving HRP to go
I was
to
about
the
to say, I was like,
RCMP.
we're dismantling HRP.
Yeah, I was like, there's no
Breaking
way.
news.
So
No.
I figured I'd ask. But
Yeah, no.
So that person sees a better career with RCMP out then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they're saying like the little training that the RCMP gets is more than what the HRP gets, is what they said.
Wow.
And they were also saying that they personally like have just had some pretty bad experiences within HRP, and that they were looking to the RCMP to finish out their career with, because
Gee.
yeah. So man, like they gotta do better.
Yeah, I mean,
But council's just like, let's pour some more money on it.
totally. Well, that was the thing. Well, it's nice to know at least the ACAB crowd didn't influence council. I'm happy that at least that amount.
Remember when they bought that tank?
Oh, I wrote a letter about that.
I'm sure you did.
I did, and I had it like out there. People copied it. People posted it. I got some interesting comments back. Like I had some like really good like people like within the African Nova Scotian community who were like, yes, absolutely. Like, thank you for like, because I had specifically mentioned, it was like, we just got the street check report, which showed like racism in our policing. Why are we buying a tank? And
Because we need it.
yeah, basically
America.
And so like had some really awesome people that I'm friends with in that community that were just like, thank you for specifically mentioning that. And then one person that I knew that was in that community that was just like, you white savior, blah, blah, blah. What do you think you're talking about my community? And I was like, whoa.
You are a white savior, dog.
So
sorry.
I know.
Gee. Can't win for losing.
Yeah, no, I was just like, so like that to me also kind of like taught me a lesson of like, do what you think is right, because the people who recognize that and who understand that are going to back you up.
Yeah.
There's always going to be somebody who's like throwing hate your way and telling you that you're either being a white savior or that you didn't do your research or that you're a douche bro. So, but yeah, just do what you think is right. And honestly, buying a tank for the city police, not right, not a smart move. But Edmonton bought it though.
Yeah, well, that's good. I mean, it was funny because I can shrug at it if it's like something like the NYPD or the Toronto Police Department. I'll be like, okay, whatever. Like they got a bigger pond to deal with.
Yeah.
But the Halifax Police Force getting a tank, I was like, for what? To trot down North Street? Like, what are you gonna do with that?
The worst part is that the RCMP here already have one.
Nice. Have we
The
used it?
HRP, no, they didn't.
Oh, dang it.
Oh,
thing.
wow.
And so that was the
So
thing.
they could have
was that
borrowed it.
HRP wanted one because they were probably like, well, the RCMP have one, so we need one too.
That's probably what happened too. We want one.
I hate it.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so thankfully, like council, like because of the outcry of its population was just like, we're not going to buy this tank. But then funny enough, like I said, Edmonton bought it, and the people of Edmonton were like, why did we buy this tank that Halifax didn't want? And it like broke down a couple times. Like there's like all this stuff with it. The story is hilarious if you go actually
The tank
follow
was
it.
not meant to be, man.
I love it.
Yeah.
Hey.
But yeah, the last thing I'll say about policing that I thought was interesting was they had mentioned, because I said, I've already kind of alluded to the fact that I'm like not big on the old traffic cops because I like to speed. Which like, don't come at me now that I've revealed that. But I was like, why don't they retask a lot of these traffic cops to do like, patrols and checks and like major crimes and things like that? Cause they were saying they're like, we're really understaffed in those areas and we're just going nonstop for all these like things like stabbings and thefts and stuff like that, which is in my opinion, what I believe police should be doing. And I was like, why are you understaffed in that area? And they said, well, during COVID, we pulled the officers who were doing, like I forget what speed checks or whatever it is. They're called, like cops out there doing traffic, pulled them in to do some of this other work.
Like what? Knocking on doors?
Probably.
Yeah, probably.
But the thing was that they said that basically the traffic police didn't want to do the other work because all they did was traffic before. So they kind of like basically quit almost, where they just didn't do anything.
The OG quiet quitters. Oh my
Because they
god.
didn't want to do it because they were like, no, we were traffic cops. That's what we wanted to do. If we're not doing that, we're not doing anything.
That's kind of iconic.
I was just like,
I love that for them.
oh my God. And so they were like, yeah, no, that doesn't work because that's what happens. I was like, well, why wasn't anybody fired over that? And they're like, please union again. I was like, oh my God.
That's what I hate unions, man.
Like they're a full cop, right? Like they were just stationed to be that, right? Like they're trained the same as every other cop, right?
Right. But you get into
You
a
fall
niche,
into a rhythm, and
that's your thing. So
oh wow,
they didn't like that. So I was like, that's interesting.
It's like, yeah.
So, I'd love to be a traffic cop too. I get it.
There's a degree. It's a degree safer than other jobs in the force, I'm sure.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's
for sure.
exactly.
I'm sure it's a big part of it.
So I'm ready for every cop out there on TikTok to be like, oh my God, and get on their keyboard. But it's a really interesting conversation. It's definitely one that
They're going to target us now.
yeah.
They'd be like, oh, yeah, well, they have access to the database. They might
pull our plates.
Pull our full names, pull our plates. All right. Well,
Pull them over every time.
Yeah.
All right, we're just going to give those guys a little bit of a hard time. And this is why people don't like cops, is because you do crap like that. Like, it's just a reality.
We created a full narrative.
Yeah. Well, it was funny that last thing, it was like, you never hear like F the fire department made into a song. And I was like, oh, that's so true.
Yeah. True.
Yeah, that's fair. But you definitely hear a lot of F the traffic cops, so.
Yeah. Just trying to get to work, man. Just trying to get to work.
Alone. Oh, I still don't forget how mad the RCMP officer was mad at me. But
when you went through your stoplight?
Yeah.
Because you ruined his night.
Yeah, I really did. I really did. He's
Spicy
like, bro,
yellow.
I'm just trying to go home.
Yeah, like they don't have to pull you over, right?
I know they can. They can just pull me over and be like, shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Now I'm leaving.
Yeah.
But
I mean, if they've gone through the work to pull you over, they're going to give you a ticket.
exactly. If I was just a pretty woman,
Oh, Josh.
I would have pulled that off.
You know what?
What do you
Then
say?
you would have got a female police officer who would
Oh,
come
probably.
up like this.
Oh, you think you're so pretty now? I'll beat you like a woman.
I'll beat you like a man.
What? Oh, dude.
You're creating a full narrative over there. What's going on?
know.
That was a Jerry Springer line.
Oh,
Rest in
okay.
peace, Jerry Springer.
That was he was popping up all over my TikTok because of the in passing. So, anyways, that was an
Guilty
iconic
pleasure,
scene.
Jerry Springer.
There was
over
no,
here.
I hated it.
I hated it so much I quoted it.
It was a clip that came up on my TikTok that I still probably the funniest thing. Actually, type it in, fella. I'll beat you like a woman. I'll beat you like a man. Iconic moment in daytime television history.
Just got one more comment for the transsexual on the end. I don't know why, but why is your bulge in your pants bigger than your...
Come up here, get the best of both worlds. I'll beat you like a woman and beat you like a man.
So, anyways, that's what I was quoting.
Oh my God.
Jerry Springer. Those shows were incredible.
Well, that was pretty neat.
Beat you like woman. No, beat you like a man. Anyways, ending on a fun note.
Like, what's he going on with over there?
Oh my God.
It's great. Snoop Dogg wanting ownership of the Ottawa Senators. Iconic. I'm excited for this. Mainly because we talked about this on the show before when it comes to the sport of hockey. Obviously, I'm more of a lacrosse person myself, but I think hockey is obviously a big part of our culture here in Canada. The issue that we've had with hockey for a long time is just accessibility. And the only way to really go big, the people that make it to the show have rich families, period. Playing AAA hockey is close to $10,000 a season. Like, how are you supposed to get to the best level? You can't play at the best level because you don't have the money to get to the best level.
Start a housing development company. Go play for the Boston Bruins. And,
Boom.
yeah.
You got it. Shout out Marshawn Holmes.
Yeah.
Won't get a cup this year, though.
Oh, dang. Awkward. But anyways, yeah, like we'll pull up this video of Snoop talking about how he's looking to have part ownership of the Senators.
I've been watching hockey for about 25 years now, and I'm watching more and more, kids that look like me play the game. But I'm not seeing it being offered to the kids over here in America. I know how big it is in Canada. And I've been, down with the NHL for a long time, going to games, announcing games, being a part of the society. So this opportunity came in order for me to be a part of the ownership of the Ottawa Senators. So I jumped on it, and then the plan that we have is to also go and build a Snoop Youth Hockey League outside of Canada so kids in urban communities can learn about hockey, can play the sport, and find ways to get into this, great thing that's called hockey. Because right now, the NBA and the NHL is having some great playoff games, and the kids need to know that there is an option to play hockey if you look like me.
I love it.
Honestly, iconic. Yeah.
And that's kind of what the sport's needed in a lot of ways, is to be able to figure out ways to make the sport more accessible.
Yeah.
That's how you grow the sport that way. You get more talent going. It just helps it.
I just love that it's like Snoop Youth.
Yeah.
I love that.
It makes me think of like the Office episode where it's Scott's Tots.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
True.
Yeah. Snoop Youth.
Snoop Dogg, yeah. And like I can imagine, because like, you know, we have the technology these days where you don't need to be in a cold climate to play. Like we have the technology where you can like, you have like these plastic sheets you can put down that act like real ice that you can skate on.
Mm-hmm.
And like they're very popular down in California, Arizona.
Yeah.
You know, like this is a good thing. I think it's a very positive thing. Having someone like him come in and help, I think is huge.
Definitely. And with that kind of name recognition too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he's
Yeah,
like,
that really
you know,
helps.
He's
Yeah.
like, I don't see people like me. I enjoy the sport. I'm going to make a way for people like me to play. I'm like 100% all the way. 2 thumbs up.
Seriously, that's like the thing is like that's why I love PK Subban, one of my favorite hockey players, because he actually brought charisma, he brought some swagger to the game, and a lot of people gave him a hard time over it, but I was like, it was needed. He was so much fun. So now seeing him, you know, his post career, now doing stuff with ESPN and doing all kinds of media, he's hilarious. I love him.
Yeah.
So he's great. Him on top of Paul Bissonnette are really doing great things for the NHL media. So
And PK was the one that got all caught up in the gun stuff, right?
no, Carey Price.
Oh, was it Carey Price? Oh,
Yeah.
okay, that's right.
Yeah.
Yikes, yeah.
So wild times.
Yeah.
Shout out Snoop Dogg.
Snoop Youth.
Snoop Youth. Oh baby. But all right, Phil, before we end off today, you have anything you want to mention? Anything you want to say?
No, just, I mean, if you have the opportunity to play a sport, do it. I think it's such a good opportunity to just make friends and, I don't know, learn valuable skills that you don't learn in other parts of your life. So, I mean, just bringing that opportunity to everyone is just like such a good thing. So, I'm all for it. 2 thumbs up for Snoop Youth.
We're here for the 2 thumbs up. So whatever it is you're doing, whether you playing hockey,
Oh my gosh, dude. Or supporting the police.
Or getting a speeding ticket.
Oh.
Or forgetting what to say.
whatever it is you're doing,
Wherever you are.
we love you.
We're out.
Peace.